Hi, I'm Rob,
I'm Lily.
and welcome to Hazel's Flight School. Today, we're going to be talking about Piedmont whites. So many of you know about those great red wines from Piedmont, and I'm talking about Barolo and Barbaresco, those mighty, mighty Italian reds. But a lot of you don't know that they grow some fantastic whites up in that neck of the woods, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So Lily, what do you know about Piedmont whites?
Well, I know Piedmont's in Italy, and I'm guessing the whites are pretty good.
They can definitely be very good. Piedmont, for the record, is up in the northeast of Italy, and literally Piedmont translates as sort of foothills of the mountains, and that's kind of where we're at there. Although technically we're not really that far from the Mediterranean coast either, to be honest. And that's gonna kind of show up in at least one of the whites here, the influence of that on what grapes get grown.
Gotcha.
But we're gonna start with one of the classic white grapes from Piedmont, and in fact, we will see it almost nowhere else in the world, and that grape is Arneis, A-R-N-E-I-S. And we're gonna taste it first, and then we're gonna chat a little bit
Okay,
about it.
let's taste.
See what you think. What do you think?
Well, you definitely get that Mediterranean influence. Definitely very bright notes of green apple in there.
Yeah.
Texturally very interesting too. It felt frothy. It felt like it should have bubbles in a way, but it is a still wine. And I also did notice when this was being poured that there was a little foam, a little fizz. It almost reminded me of the end of a wave coming up onto the beach in the ocean.
Cool. I like that imagery. So you're not wrong. Often, but not always, but often, there's a little bit of gas, a little bit of CO2 left in the wine from fermentation. And they do that because Arneis is a fairly soft, kind of low acid grape. And leaving a little spritz in there kind of cuts through some of the texture of the wine, wakes up your palate a little bit, and helps to give it a little more life, a little more lift than we would otherwise get with a kind of a too soft white, if you know what I mean.
And what fermentation method is used for the Arneis?
It's a classic fermentation method. So we're just either, usually in tank, I would say, but either in tank or barrel, finished in tank or barrel. But yeah, they try to leave a little bit of gas behind sometimes, again, to give it that little bit of spritz. So there's nothing really unusual about the method, but often they want to keep it a little spritzy. A little bit like a Vino Verde, but not quite as soft.
Yeah, this is definitely a great summer sipper.
Oh, easy summer sipper, right? Really refreshing, that little bit of spritz. I get a nice perfume note on this as well, and something, that little floral note is something we see a lot in Arneis. So yeah, if you're not familiar with this grape, especially in this hot summer weather, it's just ever so lightly spritzy sometimes. Really easy drinking white wine.
Yeah.
All right, next up, we're talking Gavi. Now, this is widely considered the white grape up in Piedmont. Gavi, by the way, is a region, a little sub-area in Piedmont. So it's actually not the grape. The grape, the main grape, if not the only grape in Gavi, is called Cortese. For what it's worth, let's taste. There are some key aspects to Gavi that I'm hoping you'll pick up on here, but give me your first impression. I really quite like this wine, actually.
Texturally, a lot more fluid over the tongue and mouthfeel than the Arneis.
Yeah. Arneis, yeah.
Than the Arneis. Definitely more acidic too. Like right after I spit out my try, I could feel the effects immediately.
Yes, a very firm acidity as well. Good mineral component for me as well, nice and mineral. Now that acidity and that minerality feature prominently, and we talked about not being too far from the Mediterranean coast here. Historically, Gavi mostly was grown and not drunk right there where it was grown. They would ship it down to the Ligurian coast, and it was a dead match for the seafood that was coming in off the Mediterranean Sea. So for those of you who are looking for a dead match, just that perfect match for seafood, Gavi has a long, long history, and it's that acidity, that nice firm minerality that make it such a great pairing for those kind of lighter dishes and seafood dishes. I'm getting a great lemon lime note off of this as well. Good perfume again. A lot of these Italian whites always seem to have this really lovely perfume to them, and so far, no exceptions.
Yeah, I think the biggest difference for these two is texturally for me and the acid level. So is there a particular reason we went from a lower to higher acid?
Very much so. When we're tasting wines, if you have a wine that's lower in acid and a wine that's higher in acid, if you have the high acid wine first, it's just going to emphasize the lack of acidity in the lower acid wine and make it can seem almost flabby or just kind of boring. It kind of feels almost like it dumbs down that lower acid wine. So by and large, when tasting wine, especially if you have a lineup of a few wines, I definitely recommend that you go for the lower acid wines first and step it up to the higher acidity. Yeah, for sure.
Gotcha.
Last but not least, we are talking Moscato d'Asti. Now, everybody, if they think of Piedmont whites, they might not think of Piedmont, but Moscato d'Asti is what we're talking about here. Spritzy, sweet.
Is Moscato d'Asti classified as a dessert wine?
We would maybe not technically call it a dessert wine. Here at Hazel's, we don't have it in the dessert wine category as a rule, but they are typically fairly sweet and will match with a lot of desserts. Yeah, and that's that classic sugar in the wine balancing sugar on your palate in your dessert. So yeah, for sure, a good match. Let's see what you think.
Oh my gosh, that is so heavily peach influenced for me.
That is a classic note. Yeah, a classic note.
Yeah.
We'll even see some Moscatos that they just put a peach right on the label.
I mean,
yeah,
it makes
definitely
sense.
something
I
we look
understand
for.
why people do that.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's great. It's definitely interesting. I've been trying a lot more of like acidic and tannic wines lately, and then to come from that group to this very sweet wine with a new wine background. It's very interesting, and this is cool because I feel like someone like you who's a wine expert can appreciate this wine for what it is, and a college girl is also gonna love this because it tastes like a peach.
This is one of those wines that when they're well made, and this one's pretty well made, simple, effective.
Yeah.
And no knock on the wine. These wines tend to not be super complex, but they seem to always get the job done.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I would be
super refreshing.
Super psyched for a glass of this and a slice of a tart or something.
Yeah, perfect, right? So, Moscato d'Asti again, a bubbly wine. The most common question we have to ask our customers, by the way, when they ask for Moscato, still or sparkling? And if we're getting sparkling, we're going to take them to Asti every single time.
Does Asti mean sparkling?
No, it does not. Asti is itself a tiny little sub-area in Piedmont, much like Gavi. So Moscato d'Asti, Moscato from Asti.
Okay.
But the classic style is to make it bubbly. It's not necessarily a rule, but
Yeah.
Now, for the record, I should note that we went softer to firmer with the acidity, but we also saved the sweetest one for last because sugar will kill your palate for dry wines. If you have to taste wines that are drier and sweeter, absolutely be sure, taste the drier ones first, do the sweeter ones later. You'll have a much better tasting experience.
Well, I also recently learned no brut champagne with wedding cake.
Yeah, terrible match. Great for a celebration, not so good for the champagne. Any other questions?
I don't think so. I think you've covered it all.
All right, so here's a quick look at the 3 classic whites coming from the Piedmont region in Italy. I highly recommend you check these wines out. Special thanks today to André Siimpson and Synergy Fine Wines, a Colorado company, for giving us their expertise and providing us with the wines today.
Thanks for tuning in for Flight School. Subscribe to our channel on YouTube and come fly with us again next time.